Hello and happy Wednesday. Thanks for attending today's webinar on our round-trip travel series of products. My name is Tim Berkey and I'm the Director of Marketing for Seven Corners. Janice Hendricks is with me today to share her vast knowledge about all things round-trip. She is our internal sales trainer and for the account management team here at Seven Corners. Janice has been with the company for over 9 years and has worked with our inside sales team and in agent support. So many of you have probably spoken with her in the past.
Hi, I'm excited to talk with you today about our round trip family of products. This is our second product webinar, and we are working to create a library of these across our product families. To ensure that we are providing you with the type of content that you need, we will send you a short survey after the webinar today. Please answer the questions with as much detail as possible about the topics and products you would like us to cover. Your input will help us design future webinars for you.
The webinar today will last approximately 40 minutes. Please feel free to ask questions. You can type them into the GoToWebinar panel and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. If we do not get to all of the questions, we will respond by email after the webinar is over. Let's first talk a little bit about Seven Corners history. This information will be new to some of you, and others are likely to already know a little bit about Seven Corners and our business. We've been in business for over 24 years. As a managing general underwriter, also known as an MGU, we develop, market, distribute, administrate, and underwrite insurance plans. We also process and pay claims. We can do this because we have both underwriting and claims paying authority for several carriers. Seven Corners also acts as a third-party administrator for several private label products and organizations. In addition, we are one of Lloyd's top 5 largest cover holders and are very proud of our 15-year partnership with Lloyd's of London. Most of the plans discussed today are underwritten by United States Fire Insurance Company, a member of the Crum & Forster group of companies. However, one of the plans, Round Trip International, is underwritten by Lloyd's.
There are 4 plans in the Round Trip family. These include Round Trip Economy, Choice, and Elite. The 4th is Round Trip International, which functions differently than the others. We will talk about it later in the webinar.
Janice, can you share a quick summary with us about the 3 plans, Economy, Choice, and Elite?
Sure, Tim. I also want to mention that you will hear many in the industry call them trip cancellation or trip can plans. We have tried to move away from these names because there are many more benefits than just trip cancellation in the plans. Let's talk about the consistencies for Economy, Choice, and Elite. All of them offer coverage for up to 90 days, and the coverage is not renewable. In addition, the plans cover travel within the United States and abroad. In this respect, they are different from the travel medical plans, which provided coverage outside one's home country. Here's an example of how these might work. If a family is traveling from Indiana to, say, Disney World, they probably spent a good bit of money for the trip. If one of them gets sick and they can't go, they could stand to lose a lot of money. These plans would help reimburse them for non-refundable costs. Let's say then also on another scenario, your aunt is traveling to Europe for 2 weeks on an organized trip. She also probably made a sizable investment in her trip. A trip protection plan would help her recoup her non-refundable trip expenses if she had to cancel or interrupt her trip, and it would provide her with medical care as well, including emergency medical evacuation if she becomes sick or hurt while traveling. I will give some specific examples of how each benefit works later in the webinar. The best way to view these plans is to think of them as a package with several different types of benefits covering different components of a traveler's trip. They cover the non-refundable deposits and payments you made for the trip. They also cover your medical expenses if you become sick or injured while you are covered. It's important to note that this medical coverage is secondary. This means we pay the excess amount of your loss over the amount of other insurance you have in place. For example, before we issue payment for medical expenses, we need a copy of the explanation of benefits, EOB, statement from your health insurance plan showing the dollar amount that they will pay. If they did not pay anything, the EOB will show that as well. If your eligible med expenses were $1,000 and your health plan paid only $500, we would pay the remaining $500. But having said that, this does not mean we will not issue a guarantee of payment when needed at the time of service. Finally, these plans cover your baggage and personal effects for your trip. Payment for this is secondary as well, so if your airline reimburses you for lost items, we will not duplicate that payment.
Great, Janice. Now let's talk about who can be covered by these plans.
Yes, that is an important consideration for selling these plans. First, you must be a U.S. resident to buy this plan, and you will be asked to provide a U.S. resident address. You can enroll up to 10 people on a plan, and they do not have to be family members. You can enroll a friend or a coworker, for example, on the same plan. Note that this is different than the way the travel medical plans worked.
So when does the coverage start and end with these plans?
This is a little more complicated than a travel medical plan because the coverage start date or effective date varies according to the type of benefit. The trip cancellation coverage begins at 12:01 a.m. the day after the date of purchase of the plan. Remember, the first line of protection for this plan is trip cancellation, and that's why this begins the day after you purchase it. The remainder of the benefits begin when you start to travel. The travel delay benefit begins after you have traveled 100 miles or more from home. All other benefits begin when you depart on your trip. The coverage end date also varies by the type of benefit. The trip cancellation ends the earlier of the day and time you depart on your trip or the day and time you cancel your trip. All other benefits end the earlier of the day the trip is completed, your scheduled return date, your arrival at your return destination, or the day you cancel the trip.
So can the insureds cancel the insurance plan if they decide they don't need it?
Yes, there is a 10-day free look for these three plans. They can cancel by sending us a written notice before the earlier of those 10 days from the coverage start date or your scheduled departure date.
And are those prorated refunds?
There are, unfortunately, not any prorated refunds. The way these plans are made, they're not available. However, as a courtesy, we can move or adjust the dates before you leave, and we can do that as a courtesy for you so you won't lose the plan entirely.
Okay. Can you give us a quick summary of how the three trip protection plans are positioned in the market?
Sure, I'd be happy to. These three plans represent a good, better, and best sort of setting and scenario. Round Trip Economy offers sort of a basic coverage and pricing. It would be a good option if you were staying in the U.S., maybe backpacking and don't need a lot of medical coverage, but still have evacuation and some of the other benefits that would apply. Round Trip Choice covers an increased benefit level, and it would also expand your coverage. It includes a political evacuation benefit that's not found in the other plans. Please note, though, that the round trip choice is not available in all states, so be sure to check this when choosing a plan. The Round Trip Elite offers the highest benefit levels, with, of course, options to expand coverage. It would be a great choice for travel abroad for those big expense trips.
Can we spend some time talking about the benefits and how they work? It seems a little confusing, mainly because we don't see many of these types of benefits in other plans.
I think many people find trip protection plans tough to understand, and so let's see if I can take some of the mystery out of them. First, let's talk about trip cancellation. This benefit is utilized if you cancel your trip due to a covered reason. There is a long list of covered reasons in the plan document, and we will talk about those in detail in just a few minutes. The trip cancellation reimburses you for unused, non-refundable prepaid payments or deposits for your trip, as well as published penalties. These can be published by the travel provider. It could include also a $75 airline fee to rebank frequent flyer miles if you use them for your trip and then decided to cancel.
Can you give an example of how this benefit would work?
Okay, let's say you planned a trip to California and you wake up on the day before your departure and you have a temperature of 104. You go to the doctor and she diagnoses you with the flu and tells you that you should not travel. You can cancel your trip because you have a covered reason, and you will need to supply a statement from your doctor verifying your illness when you file your claim.
Okay. What about trip protection? How does that work? I'm sorry, trip interruption. How does that work?
Okay, now the interruption is utilized if you interrupt your trip due to a covered reason. It reimburses you for unused non-refundable travel arrangements. It also reimburses you for additional transportation costs if you need to pay additional money to join your trip or return to your original destination. Perhaps you have to change your flight, and a new flight costs more money.
Hmm. What about, is there an example of that?
Um, I like to use this one. Let's say you're biking on a trip in Italy and you break your ankle, and that's not very fortunate. You cannot ride the bike and you can't finish the trip with your group, so you have to return home early. To do this, you have to change your flight to return home, and that costs extra money to do it. We would also reimburse you for the unused portion of your trip. You can't complete the rest of the tour. So that unused accommodation and tour costs would be reimbursed back to you with that benefit.
So how do you know what the covered reasons are for canceling and interrupting your trip?
They are all stated in the plan document and cover a wide variety of reasons. Here is a list of them. First, and for most people foremost, they go in this order: sickness, injury, or death of you, a family member, a traveling companion, or a business partner. There are some requirements in place for this. For example, like I said earlier, if you're sick or injured and you can't go, we need a doctor's order that states you cannot travel. You'll need that for your documentation. It also includes a court order appearance. This applies if you were called to serve on a jury, appear as a witness in a legal action in which you are not the party, though. Likewise, if you are hijacked, quarantined, or called for jury duty. These are reasons for cancellation or interruption. Strike refers to an unannounced strike that causes complete cessation of your common carrier service for 48 consecutive hours. That would be like an airline strike. Remember, I said unannounced now. It can't be one that you know is already in place and happening. You can also cancel if you or your traveling companion is involved in a traffic accident on your way to your departure point. You must be able to prove and support this with a police report. If you are a victim of a felonious assault within 10 days of your departure, you can cancel your trip. Also, if you are in the military and called into emergency duty for a national disaster other than war, you may cancel or interrupt. Another reason is involuntary employment termination or layoff. This is covered as long as you have been employed at the same place for at least one continuous year. Weather is a big issue for many travelers. Inclement weather that causes complete cessation of your common carrier service for at least 48 consecutive hours is a covered reason. Next is a topic that is unfortunately on everyone's minds lately: terrorism. If a terrorist incident occurs within 30 days of your scheduled departure date in a city on your itinerary, you can cancel or interrupt if this same city did not have a terrorist incident within 90 days before the incident that's causing you to cancel or interrupt, and only if your travel supplier does not offer you a substitute itinerary. Another reason is bankruptcy and default of an airline, your cruise line, or tour operator that causes complete cessation of travel services for more than 14 days after your effective date. That is if no alternative transportation has been made available to you. And finally, if your primary place of residence becomes uninhabitable during your trip due to fire, flood, burglary, or other natural disaster, then you can cancel or interrupt. We pay for losses occurring within 30 days after your residence becomes uninhabitable. Benefits are not payable if a storm of any type is named on or before the start date of your coverage. That's a lot. Yes, that is one of the many reasons we so often stress to our customers to please read your document of the plan you're deciding on so you do understand exactly what is and is not covered.
Thanks, Janice. We actually have a question that came in that I'd like to address here before we go on to single supplement about the trip cancellation part. So Joe C. asked, if you have to cancel your trip, what if the airline says they're going to give you credit towards another trip or a voucher, but does not provide a refund? How would we handle that benefit?
The voucher, we can only use a monetary figure the policy is used towards a monetary figure. So we wouldn't be able to use a voucher. When you buy a policy, you're doing it with a dollar figure amount in mind, so you would have to use that voucher towards another trip outside of the policy.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if the airline offers a voucher and that doesn't cover the full expense that was outlaid by the customer, then we would cover the difference? Is that
difference,
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But not the if it doesn't have a dollar figure, if there's a difference, yes, but not a dollar figure. It has to have a dollar figure.
So if it's a $300 voucher and they paid $500 for the flight, we would, in theory, I don't want to pre-adjudicate a claim, but we would make up the $200 difference?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, great. Thanks for the question, Joe. All right, now back to single supplement. What is single supplement?
That's a benefit that is helpful if a member is traveling with someone else who has to cancel or interrupt his or her trip. It basically means we will pay the increased cost in the per-person rate for you or your traveling companion or family member that cancels or interrupts for a covered reason.
Now let's dive into travel delay. How does that work, and what's the importance of this benefit?
This benefit kicks in if you are delayed the required number of hours to or from your trip due to a specific list of covered reasons. The list is not the same. It is a list unique to this benefit. It pays an amount per day, which varies by plan, for additional transportation, meals, and accommodations, as well as non-refundable and unused prepaid expenses.
Is there an example that we could give everyone for this?
Yeah, let's see. Let's say you're traveling from Indianapolis to Chicago and then on to Dublin, Ireland. A storm cancels your flight to Chicago, and there are no other flights until the next morning. Where will you stay? Where will you eat? And what about the non-refundable money you paid for your hotel in Dublin for the first night? The travel delay benefit would cover those. But remember, a separate shorter list of covered reasons apply, and those are listed on the slide for you.
And how does that differ from missed connection?
Missed connection applies specifically if you miss a connection for a cruise or a tour. The best way to think of this is if you are flying to Miami to catch a boat to the Caribbean. If your flight is delayed enough that you missed the ship's departure, then this benefit would help you pay the additional transportation cost to catch up to the boat for meals and accommodations. Maybe catch a flight the next day to the ship's first stop and get on the ship there. This benefit also has its own separate and unique list of covered reasons that apply. You'll see those on the slide.
What about baggage and personal items that I take on a trip? Are those protected?
They are. There are really two different kinds of benefits. The first protects for loss, theft, and damage of your baggage and personal effects. There is a per article limit and a combined maximum for specialty items such as jewelry. The second coverage is for baggage delay. This covers checked baggage only if it is misdirected by your common carrier, such as your airline. And remember, as we discussed previously, for both baggage benefits, we pay secondary. We won't duplicate a payment made by the airline. Additionally, there is a separate list of exclusions in the plan document that apply to both baggage benefits.
All right, let's move on to the medical coverage. That's a component of these plans, correct?
Absolutely. There's coverage of expenses due to an accidental injury or sickness which first occurs during the trip. A good example is if you fall while disembarking from your cruise ship and break your ankle, this would be a covered expense. Remember, expenses after the trip ends are not covered. This also includes a $750 benefit for emergency dental treatment for injury to sound natural teeth.
Now, let's talk about the part that confuses most people.
Oh, you're talking about pre-existing conditions. Okay, let's see if I can break this down and make it a little easier to understand. A pre-existing condition is an illness or a disease or situation and condition where you, your traveling companion, your business partner, or family member that's booked to travel with you has, during this 60-day period immediately prior to your coverage start date. Note I said coverage start date. This means that there is a 60-day look back to check for medical conditions if you file a claim for medical expenses. Let's expand on that a little further by talking about what it means when it says you had the condition. Number one, The condition existed if you received or were recommended to receive a test, exam, a medical treatment for it. Additionally, the condition would have manifested, worsened, or become acute, or caused symptoms which have been prompted a reasonable person to seek diagnosis, care, or treatment. That's a mouthful, I know. I said it. Simply put, it broadens the net for conditions. It does not just include ones you've received treatment for, but one that would have caused a reasonable person to seek help for it. Number two, the pre-existing condition clearly existed if you took or received a prescription for drugs or medicine for it.
But there's a modification to number two, right?
Yes, there is, Tim. The pre-existing condition is not considered pre-existing if it was treated and controlled solely by taking prescription drugs, and if it remains controlled without any change in the prescription through the 60 days before coverage starts.
So that brings us to my next question. Are pre-existing conditions covered with these 3 trip protection plans?
They are covered by the Elite and Choice, but only if they meet the 3 requirements for a waiver of the pre-existing condition exclusion. If you read the plan document, you will see that the pre-existing conditions are listed as excluded in the list of exclusions. Okay? However, there is another section where it explains that pre-existing conditions are covered, and this is how. They are covered if you, number 1, pay and enroll in the insurance within 20 days of your initial trip payment and deposit. That's the first money you put down on the trip. And number 2, insure all non-refundable trip costs and insure subsequent travel arrangements within 20 days of payment for them. And number 3, you are not disabled from travel when you pay the premium. Remember, if you are working with a client and the pre-ex is important for their situation, they should not choose round-trip economy. The waiver is not available on it.
Can you give us a couple of scenarios to explain when the waiver would come into play?
This is how I like to look at it. Scenario 1, you have a pre-existing condition you're concerned about. You want to be sure it's covered, so it's important that you buy the plan within the 20-day window, ensure your full non-refundable trip cost, and that way you're sure to have the pre-ex waiver. Scenario number 2, unfortunately, you missed the 20-day window, but you have a pre-ex condition. But now we're going to take a 60-day look back from the day you did purchase the policy and see if your pre-existing condition is controlled. Again, that control means there's been no change in your treatment, including your medication, in that 60-day period. If that is the case, then you will have coverage for your pre-existing condition. And the third scenario, you missed the deadline, you have a pre-existing condition, and when we look back to 60 days, we saw you had 3 doctor visits and went to the emergency room. You are not covered for pre-ex.
What kind of medical coverage is included?
We have emergency medical evacuation. This is an important benefit if you're traveling abroad. If medically necessary, it will pay to evacuate you to the nearest appropriate medical facility and or return you home. This benefit also provides a reunion benefit. That means if you're traveling alone and hospitalized more than 7 consecutive days, we will transport one person of your choice to travel to and from your bedside via economy transportation. Additionally, if you are hospitalized more than 7 days, we will transport your dependent children under age 18 home with an attendant if needed. These plans also pay to return your remains back to the United States or to your place of burial if you die while traveling. AD&D benefits are also included for both 24-hour AD&D and common carrier AD&D. They pay for death, loss of limb, loss of sight due to an accidental death that occurs. All 3 plans have varying limits on these 3 benefits. Some people want to know the difference between, so I'll give you a quick scenario. I say 24-hour AD&D is when you're out sightseeing, you're just enjoying your trip so much, you accidentally step off the curb while looking and taking a photograph, and you get hit by a bus or a taxi, and you die, unfortunately. That would be a 24-hour accidental death. Now let's say you're riding that bus or you're in that taxi, and an accident happens, and you're killed while being a passenger in that cab or in that bus. Now it's a common carrier AD&D. You paid a fare to ride a common carrier, and that's what both a taxi and a bus is, or a plane, or a train, or a boat, and now it becomes a common carrier AD&D.
There's a unique benefit included in round trip choice. Can you talk about that?
Yes, round trip choice includes a political evacuation benefit. It transports you to the nearest safe place or your residence if a travel advisory or warning is issued by the U.S. State Department for you to leave your location due to a couple of reasons. The first is if there is a civil, military, or a political unrest at your location, and the second is if you are expelled or declared persona non grata by your destination country. It's important to remember that this benefit is not available if a travel advisory or warning is issued before travel in your destination country. There is also a list of excluded countries where the benefit does not apply. These can be found in the round trip choice brochure.
There's also a long list of optional benefits with these plans. I know you must pay specific premiums for these benefits, and I also know that all options are not available in every state, right?
That's correct, Tim. And the best place to check availability for these is in our Agent Quick Guide, which can be found on our agent site in the right sidebar at sevencorners.com/agent. I'll spend some time touching briefly on each of the optional benefits. All three plans provide optional flight accident, death, and dismemberment benefits. This provides coverage if you are hurt or die due to an accident that occurs while you are a passenger on an aircraft. You may wish to buy this if you want additional AD&D coverage above what is included in the plan. This is only death in a flight accident, and it is a much higher benefit. Usually it's $25,000, $50,000 on a common carrier. When you're buying this, you're looking at $100,000, $250,000, and $500,000. So if you're a breadwinner of the family and travel often for business, perhaps you would be interested in this additional benefit. The optional rental car coverage is also available on all plans and in all states. It covers damage to the car due to a list of reasons such as collision, theft, and hail while you are responsible for that car. The maximum amount of coverage you can buy is $35,000. The next optional benefit is ski days and equipment. This provides $500 to reimburse you for your lift ticket if you cannot ski, and $500 for the equipment rental if your sports equipment is lost, stolen, or damaged or delayed. It's available on Round Trip Elite only, but not in Florida. There is also optional golf rounds and equipment benefit. It provides $500 to reimburse you for prepaid golf fees if you cannot play 9 holes of an 18-hole round due to weather. It also includes $500 for equipment rental, which works the same as the ski benefit. Again, it's available on Round Trip Elite only, but not in Florida. Next up is optional cancel for work reasons. For this benefit, we will reimburse you for 100% of your non-refundable trip cost if you cancel for the specific work reasons listed. Note that the basic policy already covers job termination and layoff, so you need to review the other reasons and determine if your client has exposure for them. This benefit is offered on Round Trip Elite only and is not available in Florida. The last option is cancel for any reason, or CFAR. It pays up to 75% of your non-refundable trip cost if you cancel your trip for any reason not otherwise covered. This option increases base premium by 40%. You must meet the requirements to exercise this option. This means you must cancel 2 days or more before departure, buy coverage within 20 days of your initial trip payment or deposit, and insure all non-refundable prepaid trip costs. Also, if you add subsequent trip costs, you must insure them within 15 days of payment or deposit for those arrangements.
Do many people choose the CFAR option?
Tim, it seems to be more popular choice in the past couple of years, and it's a good choice to handle many different kinds of travel issues. For example, it's really the only option to allow you to cancel your trip for, say, Zika virus. Let's say you planned a trip to the Caribbean and then found out you were pregnant. If you didn't want to take a chance on contracting Zika during pregnancy, you could cancel your trip if you bought CFAR. CFAR is also a good option for members of the military who are traveling. Currently, our military trigger covers only cancellation and interruption if you are called to emergency duty for a national disaster other than war. If your orders change, that is not an eligible reason, but if you had CFAR, then you could change that. So we often suggest somebody who's in the military traveling with family take the policy separately with CFAR, and the rest of the family can take the policy how they care to. Bottom line, you will need to identify if your clients have exposure for risk. That is not addressed by the list of covered reasons. If they do, CFAR is a good solution.
Unfortunately, so far this year, there have been many hurricanes. Can you give a basic explanation of how coverage how coverage works for hurricanes?
Well, first and foremost, once the storm is named, and the timing for this can vary between carriers, you can no longer buy a trip protection plan to cover it because it is now a known risk, and insurance is not designed to cover a known risk. Canceling or interrupting a trip for a hurricane is related to a specific trigger for weather. It states you may cancel for inclement weather that causes complete cessation of your common carrier service for 48 consecutive hours. An example of common carrier is an airline. The trip delay benefit offers protection for a delay related to a documented weather condition, which prevents you from getting to your point for departure. Also, the missed connection benefit would provide coverage if you missed your connection due to a delay of 3 or more hours due to documented weather condition, which prevented you from getting to your departure place.
Are there destination restrictions in place for these plans?
Currently, yes, there are. That includes Cuba, Islamic Republic of Iran, and Syrian Arab Republic. I'd also like to mention a few quick items about state restrictions. As I stated earlier, policy wording, the availability of optional benefits, and pricing varies by state. This is because round-trip economy, choice, and elite are filed plans, and as such, they must have been approved by each state and must adhere to state requirements for benefits and pricing. Again, the best place to check variations is in our Agent Quick Guide. When you are helping your clients choose a plan, please remember the round-trip choice is not available in all states. The restricted states are listed on the slide for you. Also, the maximum trip amount varies by state as shown on the slide.
So how do I calculate the premium for these plans?
There is a flat rate per person for trips up to 30 days. Then after that, there is an additional charge per person per day for trips over 30 days. You multiply that daily rate by the number of travel days greater than 30.
And what if I choose several optional benefits?
That begins to make calculations a little more difficult. That's why we recommend you use the online purchase engine as much as possible. If your clients use one of your coded links, you can receive a credit for the sale. It also reduces the chance for a calculation error. It adjusts for state restrictions, and it provides fulfillment immediately.
Is there anything else we need to cover in relation to round-trip economy, choice, and elite?
Yes, Tim, I would just like to mention that it's important to educate consumers about how much coverage they need to buy. I talk to a lot of travelers who try to buy the lowest option when they're traveling a long distance. It's important in this case to consider the amount of additional expense that could arise if they have a travel delay or a misconnection. In this type of scenario, it would be worth paying a little extra for round-trip elite to receive the increased benefit amount. Also, consumers need to understand how much of their trip costs to cover. They need to research and determine exactly what is non-refundable of their trip cost, what they won't have to pay till they get there, and buy coverage just for the non-refundable part.
I think our agents would be interested in hearing details about our round-trip international plan as well. How does that work?
Sure, it's an option we designed specifically for non-U.S. residents so they can travel and receive a true package of trip protection benefits with coverage for their trip costs. It works a little differently than our other trip protection plans because it requires insureds to travel outside their home country. They can travel to the United States or anywhere else in the world. In addition, their trip length is shortened to 30 days or less. You can see in the schedule that many of the benefits are similar to our other round-trip plans, including trip cancellation, trip interruption, trip delay, the missed connection benefit, the medical coverages, and the baggage coverage. There are also additional benefits such as political evacuation. They've included sports equipment rental and personal liability.
What are some of the other differences when you compare this plan to round-trip economy, choice, and elite?
Round Trip International does not include a trigger to cancel for bankruptcy of a travel supplier. It also does not include CFAR, and it does not offer a pre-existing condition waiver for medical conditions. It has its own list of excluded countries and destinations, and you can find a list of these in the brochure.
Thanks, Janice. That's a lot of information to cover here in 40 minutes, but you did a great job. I really appreciate providing our agents with some key takeaways. We do have a few more questions that came in that I'd like to address. So Joe C. asked another question specific to the rental car optional benefit. So Joe asked, is it safe to say if you purchase the rental car benefit, you can refuse the supplemental rental car insurance that is offered at the counter?
It depends on from country to country. There are times when they will ask you to go ahead and take the additional coverage in that country, and sometimes they won't. We hear both sides. We cannot guarantee that they will accept, and we can't guarantee that they won't, unfortunately. We've heard both sides of it, about 50-50.
Okay, so that sounds like it's a situation individual situation.
Individual situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We had another question about how agents can clarify some of these benefits. So asking if they can call our agent number to get clarification from someone at Seven Corners prior to selling, and I guess my response to that is absolutely. I mean, that's why we're here. We have an agent support team that has licensed agents that can advise you on the benefits and what would be best for your client given the individual scenario. So absolutely, I think that number is actually on the last slide of the deck, so we will show it on the screen here. But yeah, we are here to help you sell the right plan to your customers. I'm just looking for more questions. James asked a question that I feel we need a little more clarification on. So James, we will contact you this afternoon to get some more details on that question and provide you an answer there. I think that's it for questions, and I know we're bumping up against the time. So that's going to conclude our product webinar for today. Please provide your feedback when you receive the survey so we can design future product webinars in 2018 with the content that works best for you. If you need more detailed information about the products we discussed today, contact your account representative or inside sales team. So here's that 877 number for our inside sales team to clarify any questions you may have. We would also like to remind you about our next monthly agent webinar coming up on November 8th at 2 p.m. This will be our final webinar for 2017, and we'll be back with other great content in 2018. On November 8th, David Fisher, our Chief Revenue Officer, will act as the MC and lead the discussion about marketing and sales initiatives we're looking forward to in 2018. Additionally, Amy Brown, our Chief Operations Officer, will talk about customer experience initiatives, more efficient and timely claims processing, and member portal enhancements we're looking to in the near future. Finally, Debbie Mathis, our Director of Medical Management, will explain pre-existing conditions and how and why pre-certification is beneficial. You may register online for our next webinar at sevencorners.com/agent/webinars. We'd like to thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.